Professor Velthak's 4 eyes darted nervously around the advanced xenobiology classroom as 23 students from across the galaxy settled into their biopods. The Centaurian's pale blue skin had taken on an unhealthy greenish tint, and his tentacle fingers kept twitching against his data slate. Today was the day he'd been dreading for weeks. "Students," he began, his voice crackling through the universal translator with barely concealed anxiety. "Today, we will be conducting our final practical examination on predator response mechanisms." A collective shudder rippled through the classroom. Cree 9, a crystalline being from the outer rings, chimed nervously. "Professor, surely you don't mean—" "Yes, Miss Cree 9. We will be releasing the fear beast." The silence that followed was so complete that you could hear the gentle hum of the life support systems. Even Gorth Prime, the usually boisterous rock creature from the heavy worlds, seemed to shrink into his reinforced seat. But there was one being in the room who looked bored. The human sat in the back corner, her feet propped up on the desk, casually flipping through what appeared to be an entertainment magazine rather than her xenobiology notes. Her name was Maya Reeves, and she was the first human to attend the prestigious Galactic University of Advanced Sciences. She was also, according to every psychological profile on file, completely insane. "Miss Reeves," Professor Velthak called out, his voice taking on that particular tone teachers used when they suspected a student wasn't paying attention. "Perhaps you could enlighten us about the primary defense mechanisms employed by most sentient species when confronted with an apex predator." Maya looked up from her magazine, raising one eyebrow in a gesture that somehow managed to convey both mild interest and complete disdain. "Oh, you mean like running away really fast while screaming? Or maybe hiding behind the nearest available object while praying to whatever gods you believe in?" The professor's skin tone shifted to a deeper shade of green. The correct terminology would be tactical retreat and defensive positioning. "Miss Reeves." "Right, tactical retreat." Maya's lips curved into what could generously be called a smile, though it looked more like the expression a predator might wear while watching prey stumble into a trap. "Got it." Professor Velthak cleared his throat, which in his species sounded remarkably like a garbage disposal trying to eat a spoon. The fear beast, as many of you know, is a bioengineered entity designed to trigger the most primal terror responses in sentient beings. It feeds on fear, growing stronger and more aggressive the more frightened its targets become. Zap-14, a nervous energy-based life form, flickered anxiously. "Professor, what exactly does it look like?" "That's the truly terrifying part," Velthak replied, his tentacles now openly trembling. "The fear beast adapts its appearance to manifest the deepest, most paralyzing fears of whoever is observing it. To you, Miss Zap-14, it might appear as a massive void that threatens to drain all your energy. To Gorth Prime, it could manifest as an unstoppable erosion force." "And to humans?" asked Pip-17, a small, fuzzy creature whose entire species was basically the galactic equivalent of animated teddy bears. All eyes turned to Maya, who had returned to her magazine. She flipped a page with deliberate casualness. "Oh, I have absolutely no idea. Guess we'll find out together, won't we?" The way she said it made several students question whether coming to class today had been a good idea. In fact, Cree 9 was already calculating the structural integrity of the classroom walls and wondering if her crystalline form could punch through them fast enough. Professor Velthak activated the containment field controls with shaking tentacles. "Remember, students, the fear beast cannot actually harm you physically. The barriers will hold. This is purely a psychological exercise designed to test your ability to maintain cognitive function under extreme stress." "Sure it is," Maya muttered, not looking up from an article about vacation destinations in the spiral arm. "Because nothing ever goes wrong with harmless psychological experiments involving engineered terror monsters." The containment chamber in the center of the room began to hum, a low, subsonic vibration that seemed to resonate in everyone's bones, Well, in the bones of those who had them. For the others, it just felt like impending doom given audio form. Steam hissed from hidden vents as the chamber began to open. The lighting in the room automatically dimmed, because apparently whoever designed this facility had watched too many horror movies and thought dramatic lighting was essential for proper educational experiences. "Here it comes," whispered Velthak, though his whisper was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Remember, maintain your positions. Do not run. The sensors are calibrated to measure your fear responses, and running will result in automatic failure." A shadow began to move within the steam. Something large. Something wrong. Something that made every instinct scream that this was not a creature that should exist in any sane universe. The first student to see it clearly was Gorth Prime. The massive rock being's usual rumbling voice climbed several octaves as he pointed with a trembling boulder finger. "By the core, it's acid rain. Concentrated acid rain with teeth." The fear beast solidified into Gorth Prime's worst nightmare, a writhing mass of corrosive liquid that moved with predatory intelligence. But then it turned toward Kree 9, and its form shifted, becoming a massive, reality-warping hammer designed specifically to shatter crystalline beings. One by one, the students began to panic as the creature cycled through their fears. To Pip 17, it appeared as a giant vacuum cleaner with glowing red sensors. To Zap 14, it was a walking black hole in the shape of a cage. Each manifestation was perfectly crafted to trigger maximum psychological terror. The fear beast grew larger with each wave of panic that swept through the room. Its form became more solid, more real, more terrifying. Soon it was towering above them all, a constantly shifting nightmare that somehow managed to be everyone's worst fear simultaneously. "Professor!" Kree 9's voice was climbing toward frequencies that could shatter glass. "The containment field." Velthak looked at his controls in growing horror. The fear beast was feeding so well on the students' terror that it was actually starting to strain the barriers. Warning lights were flashing, and containment was showing stress fractures. "Everyone remain calm," he shouted, which was possibly the least helpful advice ever given in the history of education. "Do not feed it your fear." "Oh, brilliant plan," Maya commented from the back of the room, still not looking up from her magazine. "Just stop being afraid of the shape-shifting nightmare monster. Why didn't anyone think of that sooner?" The fear beast suddenly stopped its constant shifting and turned toward the source of that calm, sarcastic voice. For the first time since its release, the creature seemed genuinely curious rather than predatory. It flowed across the room toward Maya's corner, its form cycling rapidly as it tried to lock onto her fears. The other students watched in fascination and growing relief as the creature's attention focused elsewhere, giving them a moment to catch their breath. But the fear beast seemed confused. Its form kept shifting, cycling through thousands of potential fears, but nothing stuck. It tried manifesting as various Earth predators: lions, sharks, spiders, snakes. Maya glanced up briefly, shrugged, and returned to her reading. "Huh," she said. "That's a pretty good velociraptor. You got the feathers right and everything. Most people forget the feathers." The fear beast tried again, this time manifesting as more abstract fears: heights, enclosed spaces, the dark public speaking, commitment, student loan debt. Nothing. Maya just kept reading about beach resorts on Kepler 442. Professor Velthak stared at his instruments in disbelief. "This is impossible. The creature should be able to access any sentient being's fire response. How is she not affected?" The fear beast seemed to be asking itself the same question. It loomed over Maya's desk, shifting through increasingly desperate attempts to find something, anything, that would frighten her. It tried manifesting as her mother calling to ask when she was going to get married. It tried taxes. It tried the concept of a universe where coffee didn't exist. Maya looked up from her magazine with mild interest. "Are you having some kind of existential crisis? Because honestly, That's kind of sad. Your whole thing is being scary, and you can't even manage that with one human? That's gotta hurt the old ego. The fear beast actually seemed to slump slightly, its form becoming less defined, less threatening. The other students watched in amazement as the creature that had been feeding on their terror just moments before appeared to be having its feelings hurt by a bored human with a magazine. I mean, Maya continued conversationally, I get it. Everyone's got their thing, right? Gorth Prime over there is really good at being rocky. Cree 9 excels at being shiny and making musical sounds when the light hits her right. You're supposed to be scary, but here's the thing about humans. She closed her magazine and looked directly at the fear beast, which had now settled into a vaguely humanoid shape, as if trying to make itself less threatening. We're from a planet that's been trying to kill us since day one. We evolved alongside creatures that were bigger, stronger, faster, and hungrier than us. Our planet regularly throws hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, ice ages, and plagues at us, and we just keep building cities in the same spots and acting surprised when they get destroyed. The fear beast tilted what might have been its head, appearing genuinely interested in this explanation. We invented horror movies for entertainment. We pay money to be scared. We jump out of perfectly good aircraft for fun. We eat food so spicy it causes physical pain, and we call it recreational. Our idea of a good time involves strapping ourselves to machines designed to simulate the experience of falling to our deaths. Maya stood up, and instead of backing away from the fear beast, she walked closer to it. The creature actually took a step back. And you want to know the really funny part? Maya grinned, and this time it was definitely the expression of a predator. The things that actually scare humans aren't monsters or predators or death. We're scared of being ordinary. We're scared of being boring. We're scared of living safe, predictable lives where nothing interesting ever happens. The fear beast made what sounded like a confused whimper. So here's my question for you, big guy. You feed on fear, right? What happens when you encounter a species that's more afraid of being afraid than they are of anything you can show them? The creature's form began to shift again, but this time it wasn't trying to become more frightening. It was becoming smaller, less defined, almost vulnerable. Professor Velthak watched his instruments in fascination as the fear beast's energy readings began to drop. Remarkable. It's actually losing cohesion. Miss Reeves, what exactly are you doing? Maya shrugged. Nothing special. Just having a conversation with our new friend here, aren't I, buddy? To everyone's amazement, the fear beast actually responded with something that sounded like agreement. Its form had stabilized into something resembling a large, slightly sad-looking dog. See, I think the problem isn't that you're not scary enough, Maya continued, reaching out slowly toward the creature. I think the problem is that you've been hanging around with people who think fear is something to be overcome or conquered. But humans? We've got a different relationship with fear. The fear beast allowed her to touch what appeared to be its head. At the contact, it made a sound that was unmistakably a purr. We collect fears like some species collect shiny rocks. The more scared we are of something, the more likely we are to turn it into entertainment, or a sport, or a challenge to be conquered. Fear isn't our enemy. Fear is just another Tuesday. Maya scratched behind what might have been the creature's ears, and the fear beast's purring grew louder. Besides, you're actually kind of cute when you're not trying so hard to be terrifying. The other students stared in complete disbelief as the galaxy's most feared educational tool curled up at the human's feet like an oversized, interdimensional puppy. Professor Velthak looked at his instruments, then at the scene before him, then back at his instruments. I need to report this to the dean. This shouldn't be possible. Why not? Maya asked, settling back into her chair with the fear beast now resting its head on her feet. You said it adapts to reflect our fears, right? Well, my biggest fear is being stuck in a boring classroom with nothing interesting happening. And look. She gestured around the room at her classmates, who were still staring in shock. Problem solved. This is definitely not boring. The fear beast made a contented sound and closed what appeared to be its eyes. Within moments, it was fast asleep, using Maya's feet as a pillow. Maya picked up her magazine again. "Professor, since our dangerous predator is now taking a nap, can we move on to the written portion of the exam? I've got a study group meeting in an hour." Professor Velthak stared at her for a long moment, then at his sleeping fear beast, then back at Maya. "Miss Reeves, in 30 years of teaching xenobiology, I have never encountered anything like this." "Really?" Maya flipped to a new page. "That's weird. On Earth, we call this Tuesday, sometimes Wednesday, if we're feeling fancy." And that was how Maya Reeves became the first student in the history of Galactic University to not only pass the Fear Beast examination, but to adopt the Fear Beast as what appeared to be a pet. The really terrifying part? She was only getting started. 3 weeks later, Dean Morph Sachs was having the worst day of his incredibly long administrative career. His office, normally a sanctuary of academic calm, now resembled a war zone crossed with a zoo crossed with what humans would recognize as a very expensive therapy session. "Explain to me again," the dean said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had given up on sanity approximately 2 hours ago, "why there is a fear beast wearing a sweater in my office." Maya sat comfortably in the guest chair, completely unbothered by the chaos surrounding her. The fear beast, now sporting what appeared to be a hand-knitted purple sweater with "Good Boy" embroidered across the chest, was indeed curled up next to her chair, occasionally wagging what might have been a tail. "His name is Bruce," Maya said matter-of-factly, "and he was cold. The climate control in the xenobiology building is terrible for creatures that exist partially in psychological dimensions. You name the fear beast, Bruce. He likes it, don't you, Bruce?" Bruce responded by rolling over to show his belly, which apparently existed when he wanted belly rubs, but not when he was trying to be terrifying. The contradiction was giving several faculty members headaches. Professor Velthak, who had been summoned to explain the situation, was examining his tentacle fingers as if they held the secrets of the universe. "Dean, I have been teaching for 3 decades. I have seen students panic, faint, and on one memorable occasion, spontaneously evolve new defense mechanisms. But I have never seen a student domesticate our educational materials." "Domesticate is a strong word," Maya interjected. "I prefer negotiated, a mutually beneficial relationship. Bruce gets regular meals of appropriately managed fear responses, and I get a study buddy who can shapeshift into whatever I need to understand for my xenobiology practicals." "You're feeding him fear." Dean Morph Sachs's eye stalks nearly popped out of his head. "From where?" "Oh, that's the beauty of it. Horror movie nights in the dorms. Turns out Bruce absolutely loves fiction-based fear. It's like fear candy to him. All the nutritional value, none of the psychological trauma to actual people." Bruce made a happy rumbling sound and demonstrated by briefly shifting into what appeared to be a vampire, complete with dramatic cape. He then immediately shifted back to his dog-like form and wagged his tail proudly. "See, he's got great taste in classics." The dean looked at his notes, then at Bruce, then at Maya, then seriously considered early retirement. "Miss Reeves, you cannot keep a fear beast as a pet. It's against university regulations, galactic safety protocols, and basic common sense." "Actually," Maya said, pulling out a datapad, "I checked the regulations. There's nothing specifically prohibiting students from forming educational partnerships with university property, as long as said property continues to fulfill its intended function." "And how exactly is Bruce fulfilling his intended function while wearing a sweater and eating popcorn during movie nights?" "Oh, that's easy. I volunteer him for other classes. Turns out, when Bruce knows he's going home to a warm bed and belly rubs afterward, he's much more cooperative about providing measured, educational fear experiences." Professor Velthak looked up from his tentacle. "Examination. She's not wrong, Dean. Her arrangement has actually improved the fear beast's performance in other classes. Students are getting better educational value because the creature is less likely to completely terrorize them into catatonic states." "Last week," Maya continued cheerfully, He helped Professor Glix-Taven's advanced psychology class by providing perfectly calibrated anxiety responses for their stress management final. Bruce is a professional now. The dean made a noise that sounded like a deflating balloon crossed with existential despair. This is unprecedented. The Galactic Education Authority is going to want a full report. Already submitted it, Maya said, producing another data pad, along with my proposal for expanding the program. I call it Therapeutic Terror Management, or TTM for short. You submitted a what? Well, think about it logically, Dean. Bruce here represents a completely untapped resource for psychological education and therapy. Instead of just using fear beasts to terrorize students once per semester, we could develop a whole curriculum around controlled fear exposure, emotional regulation, and cross-species psychological understanding. Bruce seemed to sense he was being discussed and sat up straighter, trying to look professional. The effect was somewhat undermined by his purple sweater, but the effort was there. Besides, Maya added, Bruce has some really interesting insights about fear from a cosmic perspective. Did you know that different species' fears create different flavors of psychic energy? He's been helping me write a paper on it. The fear beast is helping you write papers? Co-authoring, technically. Bruce has a surprisingly good grasp of academic formatting. Dean Morph Sachs felt a familiar sensation that he'd come to recognize over the past 3 weeks. It was the feeling of reality taking a sharp left turn and leaving him standing at the intersection, holding a map that was no longer relevant to anything. Miss Reeves, even if your arrangement with Bruce is somehow beneficial, there are other concerns. The other students are reporting strange incidents. Oh, you mean the thing with the library? Yes, the thing with the library. Maya had the grace to look slightly sheepish. In my defense, I told Bruce to help me find research materials. I didn't specify that he shouldn't terrify the filing system into reorganizing itself alphabetically by fear factor instead of subject. The entire library is now organized by how frightening the books are to potential readers. But you have to admit, it's made finding horror literature much more efficient. Bruce made what sounded like a proud chirp. And what about the incident in the cafeteria? The dean pressed. Again, that was a miscommunication. I asked Bruce to help me figure out which foods were safe for human consumption. He interpreted that as make all the dangerous foods too terrified to be eaten. It's actually a very thoughtful approach to food safety. The vegetables are cowering, and therefore clearly marked as having concerning pesticide levels. Bruce is basically a living food safety inspector. Professor Velthak spoke up hesitantly. Dean, I hate to admit this, but the cafeteria food has actually improved significantly since the vegetables started displaying obvious fear responses. The kitchen staff now knows exactly which items to avoid serving. The dean stared at him. Are you seriously telling me that terrorizing our food supply has improved meal quality? The statistics are quite compelling, Velthak replied weakly. Maya nodded enthusiastically. See? Bruce isn't just a pet. He's a valuable member of the university community. He's improving education, food safety, library organization, and general campus morale. How exactly is he improving morale? Well, when students realize that the thing they were most afraid of is actually a big softy who likes belly rubs and knitted sweaters, it puts their other academic anxieties in perspective. Test anxiety drops significantly when you've seen the fear beast asking for head scratches. As if summoned by the mention of head scratches, Bruce padded over to Dean Morph Sachs and gazed up at him hopefully. The dean looked down at the creature that was supposed to be an instrument of educational terror and felt his resolve wavering. He's actually rather endearing, the dean admitted reluctantly. Right. And he's incredibly smart. Bruce, show the dean your impression of Professor Krinth from Advanced Mathematics. Bruce immediately shifted into a perfect replica of the notoriously stern mathematics professor, complete with the characteristic frown and tendency to hover disapprovingly over students' shoulders. The resemblance was so accurate that the dean actually jumped. Then Bruce wagged his tail and shifted back to dog form. clearly pleased with his performance. "He's been sitting in on classes," Maya explained. "Apparently, shape-shifting entities are excellent at understanding different pedagogical approaches. Bruce has some really interesting thoughts about improving mathematical education through controlled application of intellectual intimidation. The fear beast has opinions about teaching methodology. Oh yes. He thinks Professor Krinth could benefit from occasionally manifesting as students' mathematical anxieties, and then demonstrating how those anxieties can be overcome through structured problem-solving approaches." Dean Morph Sachs sat down heavily in his chair. "Miss Reeves, I came into this meeting intending to expel you and have Bruce return to secure containment. And now I'm seriously considering promoting you both to graduate research positions." Maya grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that, because Bruce and I have been working on something that we think could revolutionize psychological education across the galaxy." She pulled out a final data pad, this one significantly thicker than the others. "We call it the Adaptive Fear Learning Protocol. Essentially, it's a system where controlled fear entities like Bruce provide personalized psychological challenges designed to help students develop emotional resilience, critical thinking under pressure, and cross-species empathy." "Go on," the dean said, though he suspected he was going to regret it. "Bruce has been documenting the fear patterns of every species he's encountered. He can now predict, with remarkable accuracy, exactly what level of controlled stress will challenge a student without traumatizing them. It's like having a personal trainer for your psychological resilience. And this would involve multiple fear beasts, all trained in the same collaborative approach Bruce and I have developed. They'd work alongside faculty to provide customized educational experiences. Think of it as Scared Straight, but for academic performance. Bruce demonstrated by shifting into what appeared to be a gentle, encouraging version of academic pressure. He managed to look simultaneously supportive and mildly challenging, like a coach who believed in his team." The dean looked at his notes, looked at Bruce, looked at Maya's proposal, and then looked at the 3 weeks' worth of reports detailing the unexpected benefits of their partnership. "Miss Reeves," he said finally, "you realize that if I approve this proposal, you'll be fundamentally changing how psychological education works across the entire galactic community." "Yes, sir. And you're completely comfortable with that level of responsibility." Maya scratched Bruce behind his ears, and the fear beast made a contented sound. "Dean, I'm from a species that looked at the concept of fire and decided to put it in our homes for warmth and cooking. We turned electricity from a natural disaster into a utility. We took radiation, one of the most dangerous forces in the universe, and used it to power cities and treat cancer." Bruce nodded sagely, as if he'd heard this speech before and approved of its message. "Humans don't just overcome our fears, sir. We domesticate them. We turn them into tools. We make them work for us instead of against us." Maya stood up, and Bruce immediately moved to stand beside her, looking remarkably dignified despite his purple sweater. "So yes, I'm comfortable with changing how the galaxy thinks about fear and education, because that's what humans do. We take the impossible and make it everyday." Dean Morph Sachs signed the approval forms with a sense of inevitability. He had the distinct feeling that Maya Reeves and Bruce were going to change much more than just educational policy. As they left his office, he could hear Maya talking to Bruce about their next project. "So, I was thinking, buddy, what do you know about homesickness? Because I bet we could help with that too." The dean made a note to himself to invest in whatever companies manufactured furniture suitable for fear beasts. Something told him there was going to be a significant market for it very soon. Outside his window, he could see other students gathered around Bruce, taking turns petting the universe's first domesticated terror and laughing as he showed off his shape-shifting skills. Somehow, the sight didn't terrify him as much as it probably should have. After all, if a human could turn the fear beast into a therapy animal, what else might they domesticate next? The dean decided he probably didn't want to know the answer to that question. At least, not yet.